We all have been through a traumatic period these last few months. Israel was subjected to a violent assault on its civilian population by the launching of rockets by the Hamas. You all know who the Hamas was. The Hamas, maybe that was a Freudian slip when I said who the Hamas was, because Hamas not only was, but they are. Hopefully, if the world works in the right direction, one of these days we will be saying that Hamas was, because it's the object now of the United States, under the leadership of President Obama, to destroy Hamas, preferably from the air, violently. That is, unless they're willing to change and become friends and supporters of Israel. The America-Israel Friendship League has been around for 45 years now, organized by a member of U.S. Congress, Herb Tenzer. And over the 45 years, we have tried to develop a program to support our title. In practicality, our job is to make friends for Israel so that the people of America can understand what Israel is and what Israel does and why it's so important, not only to the Jewish people who don't need such a great explanation as to why it's important, but to everybody, not only in the United States, but throughout the world, who has come to see in this period of radical Islam assault on the civilian population of Israel was an assault, in part, of the war that started. Some people say it's World War III, World War IV, depending on how you think of the Cold War. But that since, in our mind, since September 11, 9/11/01, America has been the subject of a war, challenging its existence and the basis of its organization, of its society, by the Islamic radical movement, who attack not only Jews, but Christians, or anybody whom they deem to be an infidel. It's a war of Islamic radicalism who want to induce, inspire, and organize a caliphate, reminiscent of the caliphate that governed most of the civilized world in the 9th and 10th century, when Muhammad sprang out of the Saudi peninsula and got as far as Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and a good part of Asia. And it lasted for 500 or 600 years until they were defeated. And the caliphate is in business again. There is a caliphate existing, functioning now, in what some people think is middle Iraq. This is the so-called ISIS, the Islamic leadership government, whose objective it is to sweep up Syria, sweep up Iraq, and then sweep up the rest of the world into an Islamic society. And that is a war that America is in now. Israel is an ally of America in that because we're fighting the same sets of enemies. And the Israeli-America nexus, that is the intelligence and military, cultural, and economic affiliation, is important to both countries. One of the evidences of the importance of both countries to each other has been shown graphically in the fight with Hamas. Hamas launched, what is the number? 2, 3, 40,000 missiles against Israel, directed against Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and all the cities of the south and some other cities in the north. And why wasn't that the disaster that it could have been if so many missiles are launched at civilian populations? The answer is the Iron Dome. You all know or should know what the Iron Dome is. The Iron Dome is a missile defense system invented and developed by Israel, but funded largely by the United States. And the funding and the implementation were so successful that of the missiles launched by the Hamas against Israeli territories that were not misdirected from the beginning, that were not going to hit an important target in Israel, more than 90%, we'll hear more about that when Aharoni speaks, but more than 90% of the missiles launched by the Hamas against Israel were knocked out of the air by the Iron Dome, but for which would have been one of the most tragic developments in the history of warfare, because there is no other defense against those kind of missiles. Israel's been through a very rough time. Not only have they been through a war with a loss of more soldiers than we would like to see, but there were also civilian deaths, a great deal of harm, and a great deal of upset, where the entire south of Israel, and in some cases parts of the north, were subject to daily air raids. The Hamas fight is over temporarily. They've had 4 or 5 ceasefires. The question is whether or not the ceasefire will hold, and if it does, what will be the final or ultimate workout with the Hamas. The Hamas is an Islamic organization dedicated to the destruction not only of Israel, but to any other religious body which is not Muslim, which means Christians. And you've read what the ISIS, which is an Iraqi-Syrian version of Hamas, have done by simply killing Christians when they can find them. The only reason they don't kill Jews is they can't find them and get their hands on them. But our purpose today is to welcome the new Deputy Consul General of Israel. And for that purpose, I want to invite Aharoni, who was the Consul General of Israel, to say a word to you of welcome and to welcome his new deputy and tell us what to expect.
Talking about bonds, talking about ties, talking about relationships, Kenny mentioned the history of how the America-Israel Friendship League come about and how we work so closely together. This is my 2nd term here in New York. And I have to tell you that we need the America-Israel Friendship League in our pro-Israel landscape, in our pro-Israel camp, because for so many years the conversation about Israel was limited solely to Israel's hardships, to Israel's deficiencies, to Israel's weaknesses, to Israel's problems. And the America-Israel Friendship League was founded in order to make sure that this conversation, for one, is not just limited to the Jewish members of the community, but actually the League is welcoming every person, whether a Jew or non-Jew is irrelevant, as long as they carry Israel in their hearts, as long as they understand that Israel, and Kenny, you mentioned the fact that Hamas is out there to get us. Hamas is part of this. You know, one of the biggest misperceptions is that the conflict between Israel and Hamas is part of the conflict between Israel and the Palestinian people. This is not the case. The conflict that we have with the Palestinian people is a national conflict. The conflict that we have with Hamas, we, Western civilization, is part of the conflict the entire free world is having with global jihad. Hamas, in fact, is the main opposition to the Palestinian national movement. And I find it hard to believe that even prominent members of the American media fail to understand that very simple, basic truth. When the current leader of the Palestinian national movement, Mahmoud Abbas, known as Abu Mazen, went to pay respect to Yasser Arafat, it was Hamas that made an attempt on his life. Hamas is the #1 obstacle to peace between Israelis and Palestinians today. And unfortunately, the leadership of the Palestinian national movement did not understand that. Hopefully, it will be different in months and years to come. But the America-Israel Friendship League is helping us in this enormous undertaking of broadening the scope through which Israel is being perceived. Jews and non-Jews, it doesn't matter. And Amir Sagie continues a very long tradition. The Israeli Foreign Ministry always sent to New York the best of the best Israeli diplomats. He's succeeding Shlomi Kaufman, whom you know very well, who worked very closely with many of you. And he comes with incredibly rich experience. Strong emphasis on Asia, and I don't have to tell this room here how important it is today to understand China, to understand Southeast Asia. Amir not only knows the language, knows Chinese, actually Mandarin, but also completed his master's degree in political science and international relations from Tel Aviv University with honors. Served in China, understands the system, the Chinese system, understand the importance of the economic powers of Southeast Asia. And if this is not enough, he also has a strong understanding, a deep understanding of the Latino community as someone who served in Portugal and also understands the importance of Brazil and Latin America. And I don't have to tell this group how difficult it was for the State of Israel during this military confrontation with Gaza in Latin America. No less than 5 Latin American countries recalled their ambassadors during this operation. So to have Amir here with us, that comes with a tremendous degree of energy to learn, to become part of this community, that has this deep understanding and knowledge of not only Asia, but also Latin America, that speaks Chinese and Portuguese, I think it's a great asset. So we're earning twice. We're earning at the consulate that we have someone so talented and so capable joining our ranks, and we're earning as a community that we have such a great partner here to work with us, again, on expanding the scope through which Israel is being perceived here in the United States.
I want to begin tonight by telling you a little bit about the first time I visited the US, or New York even. It was back in October 1984. I can tell you it was certainly a very different city back then. I was also different, for sure. In fact, I barely recognized the post-Giuliani Times Square on my way to this event. It's a bit weird maybe to mention, as it may also disclose my age, but 30 years ago, as I just told you, I was an 11th grade student, part of the Israel youth delegation, YASE, you call it? YASE, on my first ever visit to the United States. We not only saw New York, the beautiful city, but Washington, and we spent some time. We were hosted by 2 amazing families in Cleveland and in Los Angeles. What makes tonight so special for me is that some of the people who are in this room now were responsible for bringing me to America on that trip. It was actually the AIFL which first introduced me to America. And the 28-day experience it provided me not only opened my eyes to this country, but taught me about how the American and the American Jewish community are advocating and standing for Israel. No doubt this was a life-changing experience for me. In a way, being with you tonight closes an important part of the circle of my life and brings me back to where I first started. I can't tell you how honored I am to be returning in an official capacity as an Israeli diplomat in New York. During the time I was on the trip, we went to public schools all over the US, spoke to diverse audiences about Israel, and explaining to American youth, the same age as I was then, exactly what Israel is all about. What is our life in Israel? In a way, this is similar to what I will be doing here in New York, with one exception. I'm not here for a month, but for the next 4 years. Although some of you may know me a little bit already, allow me to tell you a bit about myself. I've been with the Foreign Service for the last 17 years. Previously, as was told, I served in Lisbon, Portugal, and before that, I was stationed in Beijing in China. In between, I was working in the ministry, focusing on combating the assault on Israel's legitimacy, countering the global BDS efforts, and also working on issues relating to arms control and nuclear proliferation. However, I come to realize over the years that diplomacy may actually be in my blood. Though I was born in Israel, I actually spent the first years of my life in Swaziland, which is in Southern Africa, a very small kingdom in Southern Africa. My father, at that time, was an agriculture expert who traveled to Africa in the late 60s to share Israel's experience and technological know-how, fulfilling the vision of that time Foreign Minister Golda Meir, later the Prime Minister, who realized that Israelis need to demonstrate their contributions to the world. She understood very early that Israel becoming a nation is a miracle, and that there are many things Israel can do to assist nations in the developing world. In fact, when my family and I arrived in 1969 in Swaziland, they just celebrated 1 year of independence. However, to this day, Israel continues its long tradition of helping and cooperating with the developing world through the various Mashav projects and programs, and I personally look forward to building bridges with others, just like my father did in the 60s. I also look forward to tackling the many unique challenges that await me here in New York, which, as you know, is the home of the largest Israeli mission in the world. I plan to continue the wonderful work, as was told by my boss, of my predecessor, Shlomi Kaufman, and a long list of very, very capable Israeli diplomats before him, in connecting the Israeli people and the government in Israel to the Jewish organizational world and to strengthen the understanding between Israelis and the American Jewry. I also plan to focus much attention towards working with the emerging communities in the US. As the demographic map of America continues to change, I will continue to make sure that Israel is aligned with our friends in the Hispanic, in the Black, in the Asian communities. I'm also eager to work with our many allies in the interfaith world, from the Christian, Muslim, Hindu, and other religions and faiths in communities. Israel has 66 years of experience in tackling unique challenges in education, housing, welfare, women empowerment, and economic opportunities. And we can help other communities address their own needs by exposing them to Israel's unique experience and solutions to the very same problems. I think that this is the way to build bridges and lasting relationships. I will also be dedicating time to strengthening Israel's connection with the younger generation here in the US. I'm especially talking about college students, young elected officials, and the emerging leaders of all beliefs and walks of life. This includes our friend in the LGBT community and those from the liberal and progressive movements and constituencies. I want to make them feel that Israel is relevant for them and to generate real curiosity in every way, including technology, culture, and lifestyle achievements and innovation. My goal is to find a way to make Israel attractive to everyone, which should be an easy job because Israel is naturally a very attractive place. At this point, I would like to conclude by thanking the AIFL for the decades of incredible work you have done to bring Israelis and Americans closer together. Maybe I'm an example, so I can talk about that. Your work in exchanges, delegations, youth exchanges, and conferences has played a role as a pivotal link between the two nations. Importantly, these are the moral and ideological connections which unite us at our most basic core beliefs: democracy, freedom, and the pursuit of justice. As we say, the bond between America and Israel is unshakable, mainly because we continue to bridge our countries with the essential ideology. Again, I thank you for this wonderful welcome, and I look forward to getting to know you all personally and work together with you for the next 4 years. Thank you very much. So the question was, what is the difference in the perceptions of Israel in China and in Portugal? Well, in a way, it's very similar, a very strange way, because in both places, wherever you walk, as you present yourself as Israeli or as a Jew, you get a lot of admiration. In China, it's without knowing Jews. In China, there was almost no Jewish presence at all. So people that know about Israel, and they don't make the differentiation between Jews and Israel. For them, it's the same thing. And they really believe in the protocols of the Elders of Zion. They know, they really think that Israel and the Jews control the world, but in a positive way, I would say. What we call sometimes positive anti-Semitism. And while believing that, they admire the geniusity of Jewish people, and they always talk about Einstein, Marx in the same sentence, as if we are from the same people. So wherever you walk in China, there's a huge admiration for the Jews. And later on, there's now also a lot of admiration for Israel. They don't usually, I mean, the public in China, they don't really talk about politics. For them, foreign affairs is something that Beijing, a small government, should take care of, not the people. So usually they don't speak about the conflict or about problems, but they know about what happened in the Middle East, what happens in the Middle East. So they admire Israel for its strength, for the way Israel managed to be a small country with very hostile neighbors for so many years, protecting itself. They admire the Israeli IDF and its technological achievements. And especially in the recent, I would say, 20 years, they admire the Israeli technology, admire a lot the Israeli agriculture achievements. So wherever you go in China, you find a lot of admiration to the state of Israel, to the Israeli people. It's different when you talk about Beijing and their official positions towards Israel and how they vote or don't vote in the UN. That's a different issue now. But it's very similar in Portugal. There's a difference between how the government of Portugal perceives Israel as part of the EU, as a small member of the EU, usually following the mainline positions of the EU, and how the people in Portugal perceive Israel and Jews. Again, when you walk in Portugal, wherever you walk, people will tell you, I'm from Jewish descendants. I have origin, someone in my family probably was a Jew. And it's true, because if you go 500 years back in time, when Portugal was about 1 million people, 30% of the population were Jews. And later on, when the expulsion in Spain started, many Jews from Spain moved into Portugal, crossing the eastern border into the eastern mountains of Spain and bordering Portugal. So the population might have been even 40% Jewish in some time. And different from the Spaniards, most of the Jews of Portugal were not expelled. They were just forced to convert. So you can find today many, many families. You can tell it by the family name or by the stories that you can hear of people that know for sure that their ancestors were Jews. So they have a great admiration and sympathy to Jewish people. And they also don't really make this differentiation between Israel and Jews. So they also admire Israel. And then there's the political game, which is much more complicated. Portugal is a small country on the corner of Europe, and their next neighbor after Spain is Morocco. And they're very much connected politically, economically. Their energy is well established within the northern African countries, so most of their supply of gas and oil comes from Algeria, Libya, Morocco. So they always have to do this game and to be as neutral as they can in order not. They think it's a zero-sum game, so if there will be too pro-Israeli, they will lose on the Arab side. We're trying to, it was a very hard task for 4 years to tell them this is not a zero-sum game, both can win. You don't need to be a good friend of the Arabs and be a bad friend of Israel in order to succeed in your political or economic challenges. But it's two different situations. China is an emerging superpower, and we can see it. Israel in the last 20 years have doubled its presence in China. We now have an embassy and 5 missions. In Portugal, we have a small mission. It's a small country, but we still try very hard to promote the bilateral relations. Trade is very low. In China, the trade is booming. Every day it's growing. We've doubled it in the last 20 years, a few times already. There's a huge investment coming from China into Israel. They just bought Nuva, which is where we get our milk and dairy product and everything. Nuva is one of the most important parts of our food chain in Israel. So it's now owned by China, by Chinese investment. Many Israeli companies are represented in China. R&D's centers of Chinese corporations are in Israel. So the two different situations, but in many ways you see the same friendship among the people.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive on DVD with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.